Public Arts Broadcasting System presents Scott Michaels and the Central Alabama Performing Arts Guild Radio Players with an adaptation of The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Ladies and gentlemen, the director of the Guild Radio Players, Scott Michaels.
We know now that in the early years of the 21st century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's, and yet as mortal as his own. We know now that as human beings busied themselves about their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied, perhaps almost as narrowly as a man with a microscope might scrutinize the transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which, by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space. Yet across an immense ethereal gulf, minds that are to our minds as ours are to the beasts in the jungle, intellects vast, cool, and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes, and slowly and surely they drew their plans against us. In the 18th year of the 21st century came the Great Disillusionment. It was the beginning of April. Business was better. The war scare was over. More men were back at work. The market was pushing higher. On this particular day, April 1st, Arbitron estimated that 3.2 million Alabamians were listening to their radios.
This is James Spann in the Weather Center. The outlook for the next 24 hours is a bit of a question mark at this hour, with conditions changing rapidly over central Alabama. There's been what appears to be some type of atmospheric disturbance, for lack of a better term, roughly over Chilton, Perry, and Bibb counties in central Alabama. Not sure of the cause of this, but whatever it is, we'll certainly keep an eye on it. Otherwise, continued partly sunny, a perfect start to the month of April. Highs today and Sunday ranging from the upper 70s north of Birmingham to the low and mid 80s closer to Montgomery. Currently, no chance of rain until at least Tuesday, but we're watching the developing atmospheric conditions over a few central Alabama counties. Keep it here for the latest details. I'm James Spann on the Weather Center. We now take you to Senior Connection in the Park Plaza in Clanton, where the Usual Suspects Jazz Band is entertaining with a program of swing and jazz favorites.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. From Senior Connection in the beautiful Park Plaza in Clanton, we bring you the music of the Usual Suspects Jazz Band, brought to you by Pauline's Perfect Pralines. For parties or just for popping, nothing out-pops the pop of Pauline's Perfect Pralines. Here's an old New Orleans favorite, Petite Fleur.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of jazz music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 12 noon Central Time today, Professor Farrell of the Bryce Observatory in Atlanta, Georgia, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving towards the Earth at an enormous rate of speed. Professor Pierson of the University Observatory in Tuscaloosa confirms Farrell's observation and describes the phenomenon as, quote, like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun, unquote. We now return you to the music of the Usual Suspects, playing for you at Senior Connection, located in downtown Clanton.
thank you, dancers and romancers. Now a tune that never loses favor, the ever-popular Stardust, The Usual Suspects.
Ladies and gentlemen, following on the news given in our bulletin a moment ago, the National Meteorological Service has requested the large observatories of the country to keep an astronomical watch on any further disturbances on the planet Mars. Due to the unusual nature of this occurrence, we've arranged an interview with noted astronomer Professor Margaret Pierson, who will give us her views on these events from her office at the University Observatory in Tuscaloosa. We return you until then to the music of the usual suspects.
And we're back at Senior Connection in the beautiful Park Plaza in Clanton with the swinging music of the usual suspects.
We are now ready to take you to the University Observatory at Tuscaloosa, where our reporter, Carla Phillips, will interview noted astronomy professor Margaret Pierson. We now go to Tuscaloosa.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Carla Phillips speaking from the observatory on the university campus in Tuscaloosa. I'm standing in a large semicircular room. It's totally dark except for an oblong split in the ceiling. Through this opening, Professor Pierson and her staff observe the universe around us, watching the stars and planets using this enormous telescope, one of the largest in North America. If you hear a ticking sound, it's the vibration of the telescope's clockwork. Professor Pierson stands directly above us on a small platform, peering through a giant lens. I'll ask you to be patient, ladies and gentlemen, during any delay that may arise during our interview. Besides keeping an eye on the sky, Professor Pierson may be interrupted by phone or other communications. She is in constant contact with the astronomical centers of the world. Professor, may I begin our questions?
At any time, Miss Phillips.
Professor, would you please tell our radio audience exactly what you see as you observe the planet Mars through the telescope?
Nothing unusual at the moment, Miss Phillips. A red disk swimming in a blue sea, transverse stripes across the disk. Quite distinct now because Mars happens to be at the point in its orbit nearest the Earth, in opposition as we call it.
In your opinion, what do these transverse stripes represent, Professor Pierson?
Well, not canals, I can assure you, Ms. Phillips, although that's the popular urban legend among those who imagine Mars to be inhabited. From a scientific viewpoint, the stripes are merely the result of atmospheric conditions peculiar to the planet.
Then you're quite convinced as a scientist that living intelligence as we know it does not exist on Mars.
I'd say the chances against it are 1 billion to 1.
And yet, how do you account for those gas eruptions occurring on the surface of the planet at regular intervals?
Ms. Phillips, we cannot account for it. I wish we could.
By the way, Professor, for the benefit of our listeners, how far is Mars from the Earth?
Approximately 40 million miles.
Well, that seems a safe enough distance.
Thank you.
Just a moment. Someone has just handed Professor Pierson a message. While she reads it, let me remind you that we're speaking to you from the observatory on the university campus in Tuscaloosa, where we are interviewing the world-famous astronomer, Professor Margaret Pierson. Professor Pierson has passed me a message which she has just received. Professor, may I read the message to the listening audience?
Certainly, Ms. Phillips.
To Professor Pierson from Professor Farrell of the Bryce Observatory in Atlanta, Georgia, 12:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Seismograph registered shock of almost earthquake intensity occurring within a radius of 20 miles of Chilton County. Please investigate. Professor Pierson, could this possibly have something to do with the disturbances on the planet Mars?
Hardly, Ms. Phillips. This probably is a meteorite of unusual size, and its arrival at this particular time is just a coincidence. However, we shall conduct a search beginning immediately.
Thank you, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 10 minutes, we've been speaking to you from the University Observatory in Tuscaloosa, bringing you a special interview with Professor Pierson, noted astronomer. This is Carla Phillips. We're returning you now to our main studio.
Here's the latest bulletin from the Continental Radio News Service. Professor Timothy Puckett of the Puckett Observatory in Philadelphia reports observing a total of 3 explosions on the planet Mars between the hours of 11:45 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time. This confirms earlier reports received from southeastern observatories. Now, nearer home comes breaking news from Demopolis. It is reported that at 12:15 p.m., a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, fell on a farm in the neighborhood of Pools Crossroads at the junction of County Roads 16 and 37 in western Chilton County. The flash in the sky was visible within a radius of about 15 miles, and the noise of the impact was heard as far north as Calera. We've dispatched a special mobile news unit to the scene, and will have our reporter Carla Phillips give you an eyewitness account as soon as she can reach there from Tuscaloosa. In the meantime, we take you back to the swing music of the usual suspects. Take you now to Pools Crossroads in far western Chilton County for a live report.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Carla Phillips again at the Wilmuth Farm, Pools Crossroads, Alabama. Professor Pierson and I made the 40 miles from Tuscaloosa in 35 minutes. I hardly know where to begin to describe for you the strange scene we have here, like something out of a modern Arabian Nights. Well, I just got here. I haven't had a chance to look around yet. I guess that's it. Yes, I guess that's the thing directly in front of me, half buried in a good-sized crater. Must have really been moving. The ground is covered with splinters of a tree it apparently struck on its way down. What I can see of the object itself doesn't look very much like a meteor, at least not the meteors I've seen. It looks more like a huge cylinder. It has a diameter of, what would you say, Professor Pierson?
I'm sorry?
What would you say? What's the diameter?
About 30 yards.
About 30 yards. The metal on the sheath is, well, I've never seen anything like it. The color is sort of a yellowish white. Curious spectators are now pressing close to the object in spite of the efforts of the police to keep them back. They're getting in front of my line of vision. Would you mind standing to one side, please? While the policemen are pushing the crowd back, here's Mr. Wilmuth, owner of the farm here. He may have some interesting facts to add. Mr. Wilmuth, would you please tell the radio audience as much as you remember? Step closer, please. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Wilmuth.
Tell him, Junior, to tell him what happened.
Well, I was listening to the radio.
Closer and louder, please.
He was listening to the radio.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I was listening to the radio and kind of drowsing.
Yes, ma'am. He was kind of drowsing.
Louder, please, and closer.
I was listening to the radio and kind of drowsing while that professor lady was talking about Mars, so I was half dozing and half...
Just listening halfways.
As I was saying, I was listening to the radio kind of halfways.
Yes, Mr. Wilmuth, and then you saw something?
Well, not first off, I heard something.
It sure was something, all right.
And what did you hear?
A hissing sound, like this. Kind of like one of them 4th of July rockets.
And it was real loud.
Then what?
Well, I raised up, I turned my head out the window, and I could have swore I was asleep and dreaming.
Dead to the world.
Yes?
I seen a kind of greenish streak, and then zingo! Something smacked the ground, knocked me clean out my chair.
That's what it takes to get him out of his chair.
Well, were you frightened, Mr. Wilmuth?
Well, I ain't quite sure. I reckon I was kind of riled.
You don't want to rile, Junior.
Well, thank you, Mr. Wilmuth. Thank you very much.
Want me to tell you some more?
No, that's quite all right. That's fine. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just heard Mr. Wilmuth, owner of the farm where this thing has fallen. I wish I could convey the atmosphere, the background of this fantastic scene. Hundreds of cars are now parked in a field in back of us. Police are trying to rope off the roadway leading to the farm, but it's no use. They're breaking right through. A couple of dozen of the first cars have formed a circle around the edge of the crater here where the object lies half buried. Some of the more daring souls are now venturing near the edge. The yellow glow from the metal sheath is so bright it throws them into silhouette even in daylight. One man wants to touch the thing. He's having an argument with the policeman. The policeman wins. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's something I haven't mentioned to you in all this excitement, but now it's becoming more distinct. Perhaps you've caught it already on your radio. Listen. Do you hear it? It's a curious humming sound, that seems to come from inside the object. I'll move the microphone nearer. Now we're not more than 25 feet away. Can you hear it now? Oh, Professor Pierson.
Yes, Miss Phillips.
Can you tell us the meaning of that scraping noise inside the thing?
Possibly the unequal cooling of its surface.
I see. Do you still think it's a meteor, Professor?
I don't know what to think. The metal casing is definitely extraterrestrial, not found on Earth. Friction with the Earth's atmosphere usually tears holes in a meteorite. This thing is smooth, and as you can see, of cylindrical shape.
Just a minute.
She's moving.
Something's happening. Ladies and gentlemen, this is amazing.
Keep back there.
The end of the thing is beginning to flake off.
Everything's men trying to escape.
The top is beginning to rotate like a screw.
It's red hot. They're burnt to a cinder.
The thing must be hollow.
Keep those idiots back!
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most terrifying thing I have ever witnessed. Wait a minute. Someone's crawling out of the hollow top. Someone or something. The crowd is taking photos and videos now. I can see peering out of that black hole 2 luminous discs. Are they eyes? It might be a face. It might be... Good heavens! Something's wriggling out of the shadow like a gray snake. Now it's another one and another. They look like tentacles to me. There, I can see the thing's body. It's large as a bear, and it glistens like wet leather. But that face, ladies and gentlemen, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it. The eyes are black and gleam like a serpent. The mouth is V-shaped with the saliva dripping from its rimless lips that seem to quiver and pulsate. The monster, or whatever it is, can hardly move. It seems weighted down by possibly gravity or something. The thing's raising up. The crowd falls back now. They've seen plenty. This is the most extraordinary experience. I can't find words. I'll take this microphone with me as I talk. I have to stop the description until I can take a new position. Hold on, will you please? I'll be right back in a minute.
We are bringing you an eyewitness account of what's happening at the Wilmuth farm at Pools Crossroads, Alabama. We now return you to Carla Phillips on the scene at Pools Crossroads.
Ladies and gentlemen, am I on? Ladies and gentlemen, here I am, back of a stone wall that adjoins Mr. Wilmuth's garden. From here, I get a sweep of the whole scene. I'll give you every detail as long as I can talk, as long as I can see. More state troopers have arrived. They're drawing up a cordon in front of the pit, about 30 of them. No need to push the crowd back now. They're willing to keep their distance. The captain is conferring with someone. We can't quite see who. Oh, yes, I believe it's Professor Pierson. Yes, it is. Now they've parted. The professor moves around one side, studying the object, while the captain and 2 policemen advance with something in their hands. I can see it now. It's a white handkerchief tied to a pole, a flag of truce. If those creatures know what that means, what anything means, wait, something's happening. A humped shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. What's that? There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror, and it leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Good Lord, they're turning into flame. Now the whole field's caught fire. The woods, the barn, the gas tanks of cars and trucks are going up now. It's spreading everywhere. It's coming this way. About 20 yards to my right.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we're unable to continue the broadcast from Pools Crossroads. Evidently, there's some difficulty with our field transmission. However, we'll return to that point at the earliest opportunity. In the meantime, we have a late bulletin from Birmingham. Professor Indelkoffer, speaking at a luncheon of the Southeastern Astronomical Society, expressed the opinion that the explosions on Mars are nothing more than volcanic disturbances on the surface of the planet. We now continue with our piano interlude.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have just been handed a message that came in from Pools Crossroads by telephone. Just a moment. At least 40 people, including 6 state troopers, lie dead in a field west of the township of Pools Crossroads in western Chilton County. Their bodies burned and distorted beyond all possible recognition. The next voice you hear will be that of Chilton County Sheriff John Shearon.
I've been requested by the governor of the state of Alabama to place the counties of Chilton, Shelby, Autauga, Bibb, Perry, and Coosa under martial law. No one will be permitted to enter this area except by special pass issued by the state or military authorities. 4 companies of state militia are now proceeding from Montgomery and Birmingham to Pools Crossroads and will aid in the evacuation of homes within the range of military operations. Please remain calm and follow instructions from military and law enforcement, and stay close to your radio for the latest information. Thank you.
You have just been hearing Sheriff John Shearon. In the meantime, further details of the catastrophe at Pools Crossroads are coming in. We go now to Neal Vickers for details.
This is Neal Vickers in the newsroom. Reports are now coming in from the military, first responders, and state and local police. According to eyewitnesses, the strange creatures, after unleashing their deadly assault, crawled back into their crater and made no attempt to prevent the efforts of firemen to recover the bodies and extinguish the flames which menaced the entire countryside. The fire departments of Chilton, Perry, and Bibb counties are fighting the fires using cooperative efforts. We have been unable to establish contact with our mobile unit at Pools Crossroads, but we hope to be able to return you there at the earliest possible moment. In the meantime, we remind you that the counties of Chilton, Perry, Autauga, and Bibb have been placed under martial law. Travel into and out of the area has been restricted to emergency and military traffic. Please stay in your homes unless directed to evacuate. We take you now. Just one moment, please. What is that? Who? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just been informed that we have finally established communication with an eyewitness of the tragedy. Professor Pierson has been located at a farmhouse near Pools Crossroads, where she's established an emergency observation post. As a scientist, she will give you her explanation of the calamity. The next voice you will hear will be that of Professor Margaret Pierson.
I'm afraid I'm really not able to offer much in the way of authoritative information about the creatures in the rocket cylinder at Pools Crossroad, either their nature, their origin, or their purposes here on Earth. I might offer some possible explanation of their weapon of destruction. For lack of a better term, I'll refer to their mysterious weapon as a heat ray. It's all too evident that these creatures have scientific knowledge far beyond anything on Earth. It's my guess that in some way they are able to generate an intense heat and project it in a beam against a polished parabolic mirror of unknown composition, much as the mirror of a lighthouse projects a beam of light. That's really about all I could offer at this.
Thank you, Professor Pierson. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Chilton County School Superintendent Tommy Glasscock here in the studio. Mr. Glasscock, what can you tell us?
Thank you, Neal. In light of the extraordinary events today out at Pools Crossroads, the Chilton County School Board has unanimously decided to close all public schools in Chilton County until these matters are fully resolved and the safety of our county children, teachers, and staff can certainly be assured. We'll have more to say when we have more information. We just ask that everyone to please remain calm, stay close to those radios for the latest updates. And thank you again, Neal, for having us.
And thank you, Mr. Glasscock. Here's a bulletin from Clanton. It's a brief statement informing us that the charred body of Carla Phillips has been identified at St. Vincent's Chilton Hospital. Here's another bulletin from Washington, D.C., from the Office of the Director of the National Red Cross. It says 10 units of Red Cross emergency workers have been dispatched to the temporary field headquarters of the state militia outside Pools Crossroad. Here's a bulletin from the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency. The fires at Pools Crossroad and vicinity are now 100% contained. Scouts report all quiet in the crater, and no sign of life appearing from the mouth of the cylinder.
And now we have a special statement from Mr. Chris Johnson, the Director of Station Operations.
We have received a request from the Director of the Alabama Emergency Management Headquarters in Clanton to place at their disposal our entire broadcasting facility. In view of the gravity of the situation and believing that radio has a responsibility to serve in the public interest at all times, we are turning over all of our facilities to the state EMA headquarters at Clanton.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. This is Lee Helms, Director of Emergency Response Consulting. This radio frequency is now being operated in the public interest. What you will hear going forward will be a mix of news and information and internal emergency communications. Citizens, please remain in your homes unless you are directed to evacuate by state or military authorities. Motorists should be prepared to make way for emergency vehicles, first responders, and military caravans. We appreciate the public's cooperation. Do not panic. Stay informed by listening for bulletins and instructions on this station.
We take you now to the field headquarters of the state militia near Pools Crossroads in Chilton County.
This is Captain Lansing of the Signal Corps, attached to the state militia, now engaged in military operations in the vicinity of Pools Crossroads. The situation here is now completely secure. The cylindrical object, which lies in the crater directly below our position, is surrounded on all sides by 8 battalions of infantry without heavy field pieces, but adequately armed with rifles and machine guns. All calls for alarm, if any such calls ever existed, is now entirely unjustified. The things, whatever they are, do not even venture to poke their heads out above the crater. With all their reported resources, these creatures can scarcely stand up against heavy machine gun fire. Well, it's an interesting outing for the troops. I can make out their khaki uniforms crossing back and forth in front of the lights. It looks almost like a real war. There appears to be some slight smoke in the woods bordering Little Mulberry Creek, probably the last remains of this afternoon's fires. Well, we ought to see some action soon. One of the companies is deploying on the left flank. One quick thrust, and it'll be over. Now, wait a minute. I see something on top of the cylinder. No, it's nothing but a shadow. Now the troops are on the edge of the Wilmuth farm, several thousand armed men closing in on one old metal tube. Oh, wait. That wasn't a shadow. It's something moving. Solid metal, a flare rising up out of the cylinder. It's going higher and higher. Why? It's actually standing on legs, actually rearing up on a sort of metal framework. Now it's reaching above the trees and the searchlights are on it. Hold on.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our own eyes lead to the conclusion that those strange beings that landed in the Chilton County farmlands are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars. The battle that took place today at Pools Crossroads ended in the most stunning defeat ever suffered by an army in modern times. 7,000 men, armed with rifles and machine guns, pitted against one Martian machine. There are only 120 known survivors. The rest are strewn over the battle area from Pools Crossroads Enterprise, crushed and trampled to death under the metal feet of the monster, or burned away to cinders by its heat rays. People are fleeing in every direction, and it's pandemonium on the roadways. Let's go to Derek Scudder in the traffic center to get a clear picture of what's happening.
A desperate situation is what we're monitoring here in the traffic center. Traffic around the Birmingham area nearly at a standstill here in Birmingham and throughout the central part of the state. The invaders apparently unaware that the ALDOT traffic cam is still operational, allowing us to monitor some of the movement right now, but we are not seeing any traffic moving through Birmingham. Cars are either abandoned or crashed. We are seeing human traffic moving around on I-25 I-59 in the downtown city center, I-459, clogged with human traffic. Refugees trying to get out of the city. We are seeing police, National Guard units on the scene trying to marshal them along. We are getting word from the newsroom that refugees have made it to Mobile, also to Chattanooga, to Atlanta, to Nashville. Our estimates are that we're hearing from out of state twice normal populations in some of the cities outside of Alabama. And right now we are standing by for an emergency special broadcast from Montgomery, and we'll go to that now. Ladies and gentlemen, the governor of Alabama.
Are we on? My fellow citizens, I shall not try to conceal the gravity of the situation that confronts our state, nor the concern your government has in protecting the lives and property of its people. However, I wish to impress upon you, private citizens and public officials alike, all of you, the urgent need for calm and resourceful action. Fortunately, this formidable enemy is still confined to a relatively small area, and we may place our faith in the military forces to keep them there. In the meantime, placing our faith in God, we must continue the performance of our duties, each and every one of us, so that we may confront this destructive adversary with a state and a nation united, courageous, and consecrated to the preservation of human supremacy on this earth. I thank you.
You've just heard the governor speaking from Montgomery. Bulletins too numerous to read are piling up here in the studio. AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, and T-Mobile report service interruptions as the Martians use their heat ray on power lines and cell towers. Astronomers report continued gas outbursts at regular intervals on planet Mars. Majority voice opinion that the enemy will be reinforced by additional rocket machines. Attempts made to locate Professor Pierson of Tuscaloosa, who has seen the Martians at close range, have been unsuccessful. It's feared she was lost in a recent battle. Scouting planes report 3 Martian machines visible above treetops, moving north towards Birmingham with population fleeing ahead of them. Their apparent objective is to disrupt human society. We take you now to Clanton for an on-the-spot report.
This is Trey Little at exit 212 off of I-65 in Clinton, where terrified employees of one of the car dealerships has summoned 911 responders reporting a second Martian cylinder that has now landed near I-65, demolishing the Peach Water Tower as it struck the ground. We have 75,000 gallons of water now spilling onto the interstate, stranding hundreds of fleeing motorists. We've received word that Army field pieces are coming from the Anderson Army Depot to blow up the second invading unit before its cylinder can be opened and the fighting machine rigged. Amazingly, we've had no fatalities on the scene up to this point. We'll be back with more details as soon as possible. This is Trey Little reporting. Back to you.
Another bulletin from Fort Rucker Military Base. Scouting planes report enemy machines, now 3 in number, increasing speed northward, kicking over houses and trees with the apparent objective of joining their allies south of Atlanta. Here's a bulletin from Maxwell Air Force Base, Montgomery. Fleet of Army bombers carrying heavy explosives, flying north in pursuit of enemy. Scout planes keep the enemy in sight. Just a moment, please. Ladies and gentlemen, we've run special wires to the artillery line to give you direct reports in the zone of the advancing enemy. First, we take you to the battery of the 22nd Field Artillery, located at Perry Mountain.
Range, 32 meters. 32 meters. Projection, 39 degrees. 39 degrees. Fire! 140 yards to the right, sir. Shift range, 31 meters. 31 meters. Projection, 37 degrees. 37 degrees. Fire! Ahead, sir. We got the tripod of one of them. They've stopped. The others are trying to repair it. Great, get the range. Shift, 30 meters. 30 meters. Projection, 27 degrees. 27 degrees. Fire! Can't see the shell land, sir. They're letting off a smoke. What is it? A black smoke, sir, moving this way. Lying close to the ground, it's moving fast. Put on gas mask. Get ready to fire. Shift, 24 meters. 24 meters. Projection, 24 degrees. 24 degrees. Fire! Still can't see, sir. Smoke's coming nearer. Get the range. 23 meters. 23 meters. 23 meters. Projection, 22 degrees. Projection, 22 degrees.
Army bombing plane V-843. Lieutenant Vogt commanding 8 bombers. Reporting to Commander Fairfax, Maxwell Air Base. This is Vogt reporting to Commander Fairfax, Maxwell Air Base. Enemy tripod machines now in sight. Reinforced by 3 machines from the Clanton cylinder. 6 altogether. 1 machine partially crippled. Believed hit by shell from Army gun at Perry Mountain. Guns now appear silent. A heavy black fog hanging close to the earth. Of extreme density, nature unknown. No sign of heat ray. Enemy now turns north, crossing into Shelby County at the Pelham-Alabaster area. Another straddles the Cahaba River. Evident objective is Birmingham. They're pushing down high-tension power lines and cell towers. The machines are close together now and we're ready to attack. Planes circling, ready to strike. 1,000 yards and we'll be over the first. 800 yards. 600. 400. 200. There they go, the giant arm raised. Green flash. They're spraying us with flame. 2,000 feet. Engines are giving out. No chance to release bombs. Only one thing left. Drop on them, plane and all. We're diving on the first one. Now the engine's gone. 800.
This is Birmingham, Alabama, calling Maxwell Field. This is Birmingham, Alabama, calling Maxwell Field. Come in, please.
This is Maxwell Field. Go ahead.
8 Army bombers in engagement with enemy tripod machines. Engines incapacitated by heat ray. All crashed. Repeat, all crashed. 1 enemy machine destroyed. Enemy now discharging heavy black smoke in direction of...
This is Birmingham, Alabama. This is Birmingham, Alabama. Warning. Poisonous black smoke pouring across northern Shelby County. Reaches River Chase Galleria. Gas mask useless. Urge population to move into open spaces. Use Highway 31. Avoid interstates. Smoke now spreading over Hoover and Homewood.
2X2L calling CQ. 2X2L calling CQ. 2X2L calling 8X3R. Come in, please.
This is 8X3R. Coming back at 2X2L. Come back.
How's reception? How's reception? Come back. Please, where are you? 8X3R? What's the matter? Where are you?
This is Dave Perry speaking from the roof of the City Federal Building, Birmingham. The bells you hear are ringing to warn the people to evacuate the city as the Martians approach. Estimated in the last 2 hours, 3 million people have moved out along the roads to the north, but most are hopelessly jammed. All communication with Maxwell Air Force Base closed 10 minutes ago. No more defenses. Our Army wiped out. Artillery, Air Force, everything wiped out. This may be the last broadcast. We'll stay here to the end. People are holding services below us in the South Highlands Presbyterian Church. The streets are all jammed. The crowd noise is like New Year's Eve in the city. Wait a minute. Enemy now in sight above Red Mountain. Five great machines. First one is crossing over the mountain. I can see it from here, threatening UAB. A bulletin's handed me. Martian cylinders are falling all over the country. One outside Chicago, one in Denver, San Antonio. Seem to be timed and spaced. Now the first machine reaches the statue of Vulcan. He stands watching, looking down over the city. He stands eye to eye with Vulcan for a moment. He waits for the others. They rise like a line of new towers on South Side. Now they're lifting their metal hands. This is the end now. Smoke comes out, black smoke drifting over the city. People in the streets see it now. They're running towards the BJCC, thousands of them, dropping like rats. Now the smoke's spreading faster. It's reached 5 points, people trying to run away from it, but it's no use. They're falling like flies. Now the smoke's crossing 14th Avenue, 10th Avenue, University Boulevard, approaching Morris Avenue, 100 yards away. It's 50 feet.
calling CQ. Birmingham. Isn't there anyone on the air? Is there anyone on the air? Isn't there anyone?
You are listening to a Central Alabama Performing Arts Guild presentation of an original dramatic reenactment of The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. The performance will continue after a brief intermission.
As I write these notes on paper, I'm obsessed by the thought that I may be the last living human on Earth. I have been hiding in this empty house near Poole's Crossroads, a small island of daylight cut off by the black smoke from the rest of the world. Everything from before the arrival of these monstrous creatures now seems part of another life, a life that has no connection with the present. I look down at my blackened hands, my torn shoes, my tattered clothes, and I try to connect them with a professor who lives in Tuscaloosa, who on April 1st witnessed through her telescope an orange flash of light on a distant planet. My husband, my colleagues, my students, my observatory, my world. Did they ever exist? Am I Margaret Pierson? What day is it? Do days exist without calendars? Does time pass when there are no human hands left to wind the clocks? I tell myself I'm preserving human history between the covers of this little book that was meant to record the movements of the stars. But to write, I must live, and to live, I must eat. I find moldy bread in the kitchen and an orange not too spoiled to swallow. I keep watch at the window. From time to time, I catch sight of a Martian above the black smoke. Eventually, there's a hissing sound, and I see a Martian mounted on his machine, spraying the air with a jet of steam as if to dissipate the smoke. I watch in a corner as his huge metal legs nearly brush against the house. Exhausted and terrified, I fall asleep. It's the next morning. Morning. Sun streams in the window. The black cloud of gas has lifted, and the scorched meadows look as though a black snowstorm has come through. I venture from the house. I make my way to a road. No traffic. Here and there, a wrecked car, baggage overturned, a blackened skeleton. I push on north. For some reason, I feel safer trailing these monsters than running away from them. And I keep a careful watch. I've seen the Martians feed. I come to a fig tree. I fill my pockets with hard green figs. I have to stay alive somehow. For 2 days, I wander in a vague northerly direction through a desolate world that was once Alabama in springtime. Finally, I notice something that gives me hope. A small brown squirrel in a half-burned sweet gum tree. I stare at him in wonder. He stares back at me. I believe at that moment the animal and I shared the same emotion. The joy of finding another living being. I push on north. I find dead cows in a scorched field, beyond the charred ruins of a dairy farm, and then I saw them, 2, now 3 figures standing next to the partially burned farmhouse. As I approached, they ran toward me. 3 girls in tattered clothing and grimy hands and faces.
Please, ma'am, do you have any food? We have milk and eggs, but that's all we've got. Do you have any bread to go with the milk and eggs?
No, I'm afraid not. What's happened here? Are you alone? Is there anyone else?
No, it's just us now, since the monsters came.
But your parents, where are they?
Well, Daddy was in the barn birthing a new calf. When they came with a heat ray, I haven't seen them since. It burned everything in sight. The barn burned real fast.
And your mother?
We haven't been able to find Mama yet. Mama took cover in the cornfield last I saw. She's coming back. No, she's not. Yes, she is.
Well, girls, I'm going to have to take you with me to safety. You can't stay out here alone. Who knows what may...
We can't leave. We have to stay here. We can't leave Mama and Daddy. We have to wait for Mama.
Reluctantly, I left the girls to fend for themselves for a few more days. The surviving cow and the chickens they had managed to save would see them through, and I had to press north. Next day, I reached the outskirts of Birmingham. I found the city undemolished, but humbled by some whim of the advancing Martians. Presently, with an odd feeling of being watched, I caught sight of something crouching in a doorway. I made a step towards it, and it rose up and became a boy. A boy armed with a very, very large knife.
Stop! Where did you come from?
I come from many places. A long time ago from Tuscaloosa. He was wearing what was left of a Boy Scout uniform.
Tuscaloosa, huh? That's near Poole's Crossroads.
Yes.
Poole's Crossroads. There's no food here. This is my area. All the center of town over to the Civic Center. There's only food for one. Which way are you going?
I don't know. I guess I'm looking for people.
What was that? Did you hear something just then?
Only a bird. A live bird.
Hey, we're out in the open here. Let's crawl into the doorway and talk.
You seem to have picked up some useful survival skills in the Scouts. Have you seen any Martians?
Nah, they've gone over to Atlanta. The night sky's blazing with their lights, just as people were still living here. 5 days ago, a couple of them carried something big across the north side from the airport. I think they're learning how to fly.
Fly?
Yeah.
Then it's all over for humanity. Son, there's still you and me. 2 of us left anyway.
They've got themselves all set up now. They've wrecked the greatest country in the world. Those green stars, they're probably falling somewhere every night. They've only lost 1 machine. There isn't anything left for us to do. We're licked.
Where were you? You're in a uniform, a Boy Scout uniform.
Yeah, what's left of it. I was in the Boy Scouts, an Eagle Scout actually. Always dreamed of joining the military, going to officer school and becoming a general in the Army. Protect and serve. Nice dream.
What will they do with us?
I've been thinking about that. Right now, they got us right where they want us. The Martians only have to go a few miles to get a crowd on the run, like a herd of cattle. But they probably won't keep doing that. They'll start catching us and keeping the best and storing us in cages and things, like pets.
Pets?
Yeah, or farm animals, maybe. And everything that's happened so far is because we don't have enough sense to keep quiet. We keep bothering them with guns and stuff, losing our heads and rushing off in crowds. But we're gonna have to change what we're doing and adapt to the way things are now. Cities, nations, civilization, that's all over with now.
But if that's so, then what is there to live for?
Well, there won't be any more internet or smartphones or art museums for 1,000,000 years or so. And nice little dinners and restaurants, I guess they'll just be gone.
And what is there left?
Well, life. I mean, I want to live, don't you? They can't kill every last one of us, and I don't mean to get caught either, and tamed and fattened up like a 4-H calf.
What are you going to do?
I'll keep going, right under their feet. But we don't know enough. We gotta learn how to survive in the world now. We've gotta be prepared. We've got to live and stay free while we get prepared.
Tell me the rest.
Well, not all of us are cut out to survive in the wild, and it looks like that's how it's going to be. You'll see all those houses back there in the neighborhood, those fat, old, slow, and weak people who used to live in those houses? They'll be no good. They haven't got any guts, no street smarts. All they know how to do is to do what they're told. I've seen thousands of them driving to Starbucks, getting their morning latte, then hurrying off to their office jobs for fear they get fired if they didn't. Running back at night, afraid they wouldn't be home for supper. They're all scared, they're all soft, and they're all lazy. They'll love the Martians. Nice, roomy cages, good food, no worries. After a week or two of running around these deserted streets and fields, all hungry and cold, they'll be glad to be caught.
You've been thinking about this a lot, haven't you?
You bet I have. And that isn't all. These Martians will make pets out of some of us, train us to do tricks, who knows. They'll probably love acrobats and musicians. And some, maybe, will train us to hunt us like coon dogs.
No, that's impossible. No human being...
I bet they will. And if one of us ever comes after me, well, I'll...
In the meantime, you and I and others like us, where are we to live when the Martians own the Earth?
I've been thinking about the sewers. Did you know there are miles and miles of them under UAB in most of downtown? The main ones are big enough for anybody. Then the cellars, bank vaults, underground storerooms will have a bunch of young, strong people together. No weak ones, no sick ones.
And you meant me to go?
Well, I gave you a chance, didn't I?
We won't quarrel about that. Go on.
And we've got to make safe places for us to stay in. And get all the books we can, science books. That's what really smart people like you come in. Or raid the museums and libraries. I mean, the internet's gone. Real books are the only answer. We'll even spy on the Martians. It might not even take us long to learn enough. Just imagine 4 or 5 of their own fighting machines suddenly start off, heat rays left and right, and no Martians in them. No Martians, but men. Men like me who have learned how. It might only take a few years. Imagine controlling one of those amazing things with its heat ray wide open. We turn in on those Martians. We turn it on everybody.
That's your plan?
You and me and a few more of us. We could own the whole world.
I see.
Hey, what's the matter? Where are you going?
Not to your world. Goodbye, stranger. After parting with the Boy Scout, I came at last to 5 Points South, anxious to know the fate of UAB in the inner city. Cautiously, I made my way up 20th Street. It was strange seeing the UAB campus completely deserted, no construction going on, only the oppressive silence and that foul odor. I pressed on, reaching Morris Avenue, and there again were black powder and several bodies, and an evil, ominous smell coming from the sewer gratings. I wandered up through Lynn Park.
I stood alone at the silent fountain. I caught sight of a skinny dog running down Park Place with a piece of dark brown meat in his jaws, and a pack of starving mongrels running after him. He made a wide circle around me as though he thought I might try to take it as well. I walked up 18th Street, past the silent shop windows, displaying their wares to empty sidewalks, past the Alabama Theater and then Lyric, both silent, dark. Near 5th Avenue, I noticed 2017 cars in the showrooms, facing deserted streets. From over the top of the Alabama Power Building, I watched a flock of vultures
just circling in the sky. I just kept moving. Then all of a sudden, I caught sight of a hood of a Martian machine standing somewhere over near Sloss Furnace. The sun was reflecting off of it like crazy. Then this insane idea hit me. I just sprinted full out across 35th Street and into the park. I climbed up a rusty old metal ladder on the north side of the furnace. From there, I could look down and see them, all lined up in a row along the railroad track. 19 of those huge metal fighting machines, totally empty. Their giant steel arms were just hanging by their sides. I kept looking around, wondering where the Martians were.
Then I noticed this huge flock of black birds that were hovering right below me. They circled to the ground, and that's where I finally saw the Martians. It looked like a battlefield, with the hungry birds pecking and tearing the brown shreds of flesh from their dead bodies. Later, when their bodies were examined in laboratories, it showed that they were killed by viruses and disease bacteria that their immune systems could not resist. They were completely wiped out after all mankind's defenses had failed by the humblest thing that God, in His wisdom, had put on this earth. Before the cylinder fell, there was a general opinion that throughout all the known universe, no life existed beyond the surface of the earth.
Now we see further. There's a genuine curiosity about what forms life may take in other worlds, and where those worlds might be. Eventually, life as we know it may spread from right here throughout all of space, but that's just a dream at this point. It may be that the destruction of the Martians is only a temporary reprieve.
Seems strange now to sit in my peaceful study in Tuscaloosa, writing down this last chapter of the record begun at a deserted farm in Poole's Crossroads. Strange to see from my window the university campus, bright and clean in the cool spring air. Strange to watch carefree children playing. Strange to see young people strolling on the green, where the new spring grass heals the last black scars of a bruised earth. Strange to watch the sightseers enter the museum, where the disassembled parts of a Martian machine are on display. Strange when I recall the time when I first saw it, bright and clean, hard and silent, under the dawn of that last great day.
This is Scott Michaels, here to assure you that the War of the Worlds has no further significance than as the April Fool's Day offering it was intended to be. The Guild Theater's own radio version of a good old-fashioned practical joke. Starting now, we couldn't soap all your windows and steal all your garden gates by tonight. So we did the next best thing. We annihilated the world before your very ears and utterly destroyed the Peach Water Tower. You'll be relieved, I hope, to learn that we didn't mean it and that both institutions are still open for business. Our very able cast of characters includes Mary Schiermann as Professor Margaret Pierson, Susan Martin as the ill-fated Carla Phillips, Reid Jackson and Sarah Jackson as Mr. and Mrs. Wilmuth, Dison Barbaree as the Boy Scout, and our staff announcers, Cade Ashley, Clay Vinson, Aiden Jackson, and Alyssa Lemire. Kent Martin as Lieutenant Commander Vogt, Mike Curry as the Governor, Nate Greenewalt as Cub Reporter Trey Little, Rhett Barbaree as Captain Lansing, Howard Beckner, Zach Dawson, and Don Wendorf as the Officer, the Gunner, and the Reporter, respectively. Alden Burke, Zach Vinson, Joshua Burke, and Art Hoyt played our radio operators. Shayla Nielsen, Shauna Nielsen, and Malila Gold played the three sisters. The montage of voices in our Survivor's soliloquy included Ivy Vinson, Brett Morgan, Colleen Nielsen, and Jacob Schiermann. Special vocal effects were provided by Zach Curtis and Dustin Cater. Our cast also includes some very good sports, who had more than a little fun playing themselves. They include James Spann, Neal Vickers, Derek Scudder, Chilton County Sheriff John Shearon, Lee Helms, Chris Johnson, Chilton County School Superintendent Tommy Glasscock, and Dave Perry. So, goodbye everybody, and remember the terrible lesson you learned here today. Things aren't always what they seem, especially on April Fool's Day.
Today, the Central Alabama Performing Arts Guild has brought you an adaptation of The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, the first in its series of dramatic broadcasts featuring Scott Michaels and the Guild radio players. This is the Public Arts Broadcasting System.
The Central Alabama Performing Arts Guild exists to bring the benefits of music, dance, comedy, drama, and other performing arts to the community at large. You can find us by searching Central Alabama Performing Arts Guild on Facebook. Like our page, share it with your friends, and you'll always know what we're up to. This program was produced by Great Scott Media, Incorporated.